Hey guys, welcome to the channel. First time doing a video, hopefully it goes well. I'm just showing videos what I like. And let's go from there. Let's go!
You are looking at some of the last remaining footage of the old world, digitally enhanced and recolorized for your eyes to behold and bear witness to. Many of the structures and even a lot more of the people probably didn't survive the great wars to come. We're the last generation that will be able to look at footage or images and know that any of them are genuine. You are all some of the last remaining witnesses to a world that some may soon believe never really existed. We didn't necessarily have to believe the words, but at least we knew the images were true.
I know everybody thinks these
I mean, it's true. You know, you're seeing all these buildings disappear. They were perfect. Luckily, some of them are still standing. And people just forget. People are too busy to know what's even going on, right? So, but this is a really good video. Play this one.
buildings are Tartarian, but let me tell you why these are the buildings from the 1,000 years of Jesus and not Tartarian. Now, before I even prove this, just know that I'm not saying Tartaria is not real. It was real. It was just a small group of people, though, in Asia during the 1,000 years of Jesus. It was not a worldwide civilization just doing everything. So, as we can see right here, this building right here was supposedly built in the Dark Ages, right? And today it would cost to some experts $300 billion. And the craziest part about that, the craziest part is that these buildings don't have bathrooms, and that they tell us that people were using the bathrooms, like going poop, in the hallways. But then they built that building, you know what I mean? So they
Yeah, I mean, that is complete nonsense when you see these pictures of people, throwing out their stuff through windows and buckets, and people were just walking around, you know, like people would have died, from the disease. Like it's absolute lunacy, and we buy this garbage.
tell us that we couldn't build toilets and all that stuff because we didn't know how to plumb, but we knew how to make buildings. But when you actually know when those buildings were built and see buildings like this that were built at the same time, they always have fountains. And that's plumbing. Like, you can't have a water fountain, especially with that much water pushing out and that many fountains, without plumbing or a knowledge of how that works. So, why don't these buildings have bathrooms? It's because Jesus came back and glorified the saints, the people that died for him. He gave them resurrected, glorified bodies, and they didn't have to eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom. These buildings were very clearly for them. That's why these buildings all are in the name of saints. They all represent Jesus. They all have saints painted on them with halos, and then normal people without them. And although they try to hide a lot of the proof within the buildings, a lot of buildings still have proof like this, where it literally says in the cathedral, 1,000 year millennial reign. And that's in Ukraine. So obviously, it was not just in America, it was not just in Europe where Christianity happened, like it was worldwide. For example, this building says J772, but in the mainstream narrative, it'll say 1772, so 1772. But if you're using the context that Jesus came back already, it'd be 772 years and 1,000 years of Jesus. You see the same thing with all the other countries of the world with their coins. They have J 1736, right? They'll have a J for Jesus or I for Jesus in Latin and Greek. So as you can see here, it'll say 1736, but then we very clearly see it's a J. So they're clearly trying to hide the 1,000 years of Jesus. There's a reason all these old world buildings have this stone and like crystals, because they were using buildings for free energy, which obviously sounds like something that would only happen if the devil was bound for 1,000 years and humans were living to their fullest potential within, obviously, the restrictions of this world. Now, even if you're a Christian or not, you still have to explain how these buildings right here were supposedly built by the same people here in this photo in America during the same time. Because
Yeah, it's funny. They have all these buildings like in shacks, and it says Old City Hall, and then behind it you have this amazing stone structure, right? So people in shacks build stone and masonry buildings. Like it's absolute lunacy to think that they could have done it. It's just the sheer amount of equipment you need to create these things. It's absurd, and for the population that we had, right? So I mean, these buildings are amazing. We're building square boxes today.
these buildings were built in the 1700s and 1800s, supposedly, right? By these people who were just migrating from England into the country, mining for gold, but then living here, but then making these. So clearly, there was a reset where we cannot build this anymore. And these buildings during the 1,000-year Dark Ages were super advanced. And the Dark Ages are called that because supposedly technology, architecture, medicine, none of that advanced for 1,000 years. But then we were building things like this, all dedicated to Jesus and saints, and it had free energy. So what is that?
Yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing. And you see all these buildings, churches. They say the other churches, but were they really churches, or they just repurpose these buildings, right? And just nothing but more a nonsense of that his story, right? You know, it's funny. We're told mercury is really bad for you, this and that. Um, it's funny. Everything they tell you it's bad for you, it's actually good for us, right? So we stay away from things like lead paint or mercury. I don't know. There must be other things out there, right? And you're always sold something that's a lot worse for you, and it costs more money, right? So absolutely sad the state we live in, right? Where a light bulb can literally last forever, but you only get like 1,000 hours out of it.
a city in America that
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. If you look at like France and all these structures, and now you look at what they're building, you know, we have no idea how to build these things. We have no idea. We are. It feels like we're going backwards, almost. And then you have these all this craze for tiny homes. Like these people live in palaces. They lived in palaces, and we're building tiny homes for people. Absolute madness. But this is a good video about old Chicago and probably many other cities.
look like this. That's the city of Chicago over 130 years ago, and it looked like a whole other world. Often referred to as the White City for its gleaming neoclassical buildings, this historical architecture stands as a testament to human achievement and vision. This was the chosen location for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the World Fair. This looks nothing like Chicago does today. The fairground sprawled over 600 acres, featuring 200 monumental structures that defied people's imagination at the time. More than 27 million people attended the exposition during its 6-month run. Through preserved footage and photographs, we witnessed the splendor of this event. Attendees marveled at architectural wonders and engaging with groundbreaking technological displays. The liberal arts and manufacturers building alone covered nearly 32 acres, with the capacity to fit 4 of the great Roman Colosseums inside it and seat 300,000 people. Its vastness was almost incomprehensible. One of the event's most iconic images was a 65-foot golden statue of the Republic, gleaming in the sun and towering over the central lagoon of an elaborate canal system that was very similar to Venice. Visitors could cover more territory by traveling in Venetian-style gondolas through the canals that span through most of the fairgrounds. The fair also showcased the wonders of electricity, with entire buildings illuminated by thousands of incandescent bulbs. This took place in a time when Nikola Tesla, the inventor of AC electrical systems, had won the War of the Currents against Thomas Edison's DC electrical systems. The integration of electrical power into nearly every aspect of society can in many ways be traced back to this historical event. Technological marvels such as the first practical electric automobile and the first electric kitchen with an automatic dishwasher were also introduced. Among the fair's most novel and impressive exhibits was the first ever Ferris wheel. It stood 264 feet tall and could carry over 2,000 passengers at a time. This giant observation wheel gave many their first bird's-eye view of the city. Another groundbreaking exhibit was the introduction of the moving walkway, a precursor to the modern escalator. As we delve deeper into the World's Fair events, a pattern begins to emerge, one that seems to defy the conventional history we've all been taught. In cities all over the world, we consistently see the same grand and ornate structures, civil engineering, and infrastructure projects being constructed on a colossal scale with an impossible time frame. As we observe the fairgrounds, a question lingers. How are these monumental structures built in such a time span? The official narrative suggests the exposition was built in just 2 years, but the logistical challenges of the late 19th century cast doubt on this rapid timeline. Less than 30 years after the Civil War, we find cities like Chicago looking as if they were part of Vatican City or anywhere else in Old World Europe, yet we are told that everything was built using wood plaster and temporary materials with the intention of demolishing them when the fair ended. Furthermore, the reported materials used plaster jute fiber and other temporary substances raised concern about durability. With millions of visitors, the wear and tear on these hastily constructed buildings would have been significant. Additionally, the construction of the canals, especially within the swampy terrain of Jackson's Park, added another layer of complexity. Building these waterways required significant excavation, water management, and structural work, all within the same tight timeline. How did these structures and canals withstand the immense foot traffic, the elements, and the test of time, even if just for the duration of the fair? It's a puzzle that challenges the official narrative and fuels speculation. The architectural marvels of the fair, labeled as temporary, have long been a source of intrigue. Their intricate designs and sheer grandeur seem disproportionate for structures meant only to last for a short time. However, without exception, some isolated buildings still stand today because some were constructed with permanent materials. Everything else got destroyed. We get a glimpse of the craftsmanship through structures like the Art Institute of Chicago and the Museum of Science and Industry. In Chicago's case, the majority of the fairgrounds did not need to be demolished because they were conveniently destroyed by a fire a few months after the event ended. Why were certain buildings constructed from permanent materials, and why did they so often hold the title of the world's largest buildings at the time? It raises the question, how could the world's largest buildings have been constructed with using mostly temporary materials? Are we to believe that just over a century ago, people made a habit of building some of the largest magnificent and ornate buildings ever seen, only to use them for a few months? Even if we disregard the buildings themselves, the earthworks involved in these projects would challenge modern capabilities and equipment under such tight timelines. And most importantly, why would they do all this just to destroy it? Could the World's Fair events have been the perfect cover-up to hide the remnants of a unified global system that existed before the upheaval of the Civil War and the two world wars were used to reshape our world? The similarities between the narrative surrounding the fairs, the architecture, and the scale all seem to point to something more than coincidence. It suggests a carefully orchestrated erasure of the past we were never meant to remember. A great example would be the lost civilization of the Tartarian Empire, but I'll save that for another video. We have to ask ourselves how much of our history has been rewritten, what has been lost, and how much has been hidden in plain sight.
You know, it's crazy. You know, you look at these buildings and you almost feel happy, you know, inside. And you look at today's buildings, big block boxes, black, gray. They look like prison cells. And this was all destroyed. This wasn't temporary, you know. And I think all these wars that we were taught, you know, they're nothing but more than a facade for something bigger, you know. These buildings were destroyed on purpose, and they used wars to cover everything up. Anyway, thanks for the video. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you like it. Comment, subscribe, and off to the next one. Ciao. Peace.